Hi chess friends, this is King's Executor covering round 12 of the Candidates Tournament 2013, and this is my game of the day choice, a 90 moves game, so as if it was from a tournament of engines. Carlsen and Ivanchuk is this game. Carlsen opened with e4 and Ivanchuk replied with the Sicilian. So this is a really long drama Carlsen has to face in this game. We see the Scheveningen setup here, I believe, and Queen c7 here. Well, just to get a feeling for the opening, what about Knight b5? Queen has to drop back then, and g3 to prepare Bishop f4. Say a6 here and Bishop f4. That idea wouldn't work, trying to exploit the dark squares because of e5, attacking two pieces at the same time. So this is why Knight b5 doesn't bring white anywhere. Bishop e3 by Carlsen, a6 now, Queen d2, Knight f6, castles long. So you see that b pawn coming down the board here in many games, trying to gain tempi on the knight and developing the bishop here, and then use this c-file, which is a trump in the Sicilian for black, against the long castle variations, especially there. Bishop b4 pinning the knight, f3. The pawn was attacked due to the pin. Knight e7, probably preparing simply d5, and this of course opens up fire twice against the knight. Two moves here. One move would be knight back to e2, covering c3, which would leave this bishop blocked in. d5 then, for example, a3, bishop a5, bishop g5, takes. This is rather sharp. The question is how to proceed here. If pawn takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, attacking the rook. Rook g8 is best. Let's just drop back. If pawn takes knight, forking rook and bishop, queen takes, bishop takes, bishop takes. And this is the point why this is worse for black, because this bishop could take here, keep this pawn structure intact, and leave black with a very bad pawn structure here. And of course he's a piece up as well. So let's drop back. Rook g8 would be best here. Pawn takes pawn, for example, is one line. I mean, there are two pieces attacked. You have to decide which you want to keep, and in this position you can activate the bishop now. To h3, bishop d7, queen h6. Looks very strong for white, but queen e5 holds everything together, and this is a rather balanced position, but it's sharp, of course. It's very sharp. If you play correctly, it should be a draw. So let's drop back. This would be a sample line of knight back to e2, but the game continuation was knight b3. I believe this is a rarer move. d5 was answered by e5. So the queen, if the queen takes this pawn, we would see the typical bishop f4, cutting out the retreat squares for the queen. And yeah, on bishop f5 we would have g4, and on queen g6, bishop d3, that would win the queen. Let's just drop back. That's the same for queen h5. So no good to take on e5 here for black. So knight back to d7 and f4, because the pawn was attacked by the knight. b6, trying to activate the bishop on to b7. Bishop d4, blocking that pawn, that passed pawn. Knight c5, a3, and this allows knight e4, attacking the queen and the knight. So takes, 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 takes. Well, not the most preferable position for white here with this pawn structure. On the other hand, black's got the worse bishop due to this pawn structure on the light squares, and white's got the better bishop because white's bishop can be active on both flanks. a5, knight into the center, bishop a6. This is a good move. This is almost an idea out of the French when you want to exchange the bad bishop for the good bishop. Bishop d3, and white is saying if you want to exchange bishops, you have to repair my pawn structure. If takes and takes, well, then we have this nice central pawns here, and I think then white would have an edge. King d7, king d2, knight c6, and rook b1. So until here it looks okay for white. Bishop takes on d3, and now it's a question what to do. If you want to take with a pawn, black would probably intend to take and then to double the pawns on the d file. The question is, do I want to leave my pawns here where they can be attacked maybe? Or do I want to have them out of the c file? Carlsen took with the king and rook b8 covering the pawn. Knight b5, nice square here on d6, and g5 by black. Well, if white takes that pawn, this pawn drops, and then again white has these double pawns which can be attacked. So g3, rook to g8, c4, trying to exchange the bad double pawns here, isolated double pawns. Takes on f4, and well, if pawn takes on c4 and king takes, this could have been played by Ivanchuk, by black, because of rook g4, and now it's difficult to hold. If you play rook f1, that runs into knight takes e5 check, and of course the pawn is pinned. I don't know why we didn't see that. We see knight e7, rook g1, and now takes on c4 and knight d5. Well, probably this was Ivanchuk's choice. Maybe he overlooked the little idea, I don't know. Rook c6. Let's drop back. Why not taking on f4? Because then rook takes rook, and then rook takes b6 with the threat of check on b7, winning the f pawn. So if knight d5, check, takes, rook g2 attacking 2 pawns, then takes on h2, check, and this is equal. Let's drop back. So this is why we see king c6 to cover the b6 pawn with the king. So rook takes rook, rook takes rook. The b pawn doesn't fall for black. But knight takes f7 and knight takes f4. And king b3, because let's drop back, b5 check is threatened. So king b3, king c5, knight g5, h6, knight e4, check, king d4, and knight f6. So long knight maneuver, the rook on g8 is attacked, so takes, and now black cannot take the pawn on e5 due to this fork on d7, winning the rook. So rook c8, getting out of this fork, and rook e1 covering the e-pawn. Rook c3 check, rook f3, surely intending some nasty discoveries against well, no discovery, sorry. Rook e4, king c5, and knight d7, check, king d5 attacking the rook, and now check, and I think Magnus hoped for a draw here, but king c6, knight f6, and knight g6, rook c4 check, and now it's rather a difficult position. The e-pawn is attacked. Magnus Carlsen played rook e4, just repeating the position, but it's not so easy. It's really difficult. It's difficult to find rook c8 and to justify it. Let's look at this variation. This is what the engine gives as best, and it's really difficult to follow up from here on. If knight takes e5, the problem for white is that the knight is has only one central square here. Every other square besides the unimportant squares on the edge of the board, they are controlled by black. So knight e4 would be rather forced, and after rook e3, well, knight d6 is the only move where the king has to go to a4 or else it's mate. Let's just drop back. If knight c3, can you believe that with king a6 black is winning in this position? Well, the engine says. If a4, king b7, well, there are many lines, but the problem is that you see the knight is pinned to the king. The king has to protect the knight all the time, and this black knight is very active in many different lines. And if you get out of the pin here, then again check, check, and you see black is getting so active and white is really immobile here, really paralyzed. Check. Again attacking the rook. This is one sample line why knight c3 would be so bad. Check, and here in this position would win even the piece. So it's really difficult to see that knight d6 check does help. King a4 and rook f8 is one of the moves which is necessary to be played, because rook takes a3 is not possible. That would lose the rook for black with rook f4 check. So rook f3 and rook to e8. Let's just drop back. If you take on f3, that would be bad. That would attack this pawn, and black is too active in this position. Let's look at it. Takes, takes, and yeah, say you want to save the pawn. I think it's difficult. Maybe there are even drawing chances, but I think b5, and well, black is gaining very well tempi with knight g5s, and then back again attacking a pawn which moved here, and then pushing with this pawn as well. So it's difficult. So if rook e8 here, then takes, attacking the knight, and the problem is black has to defend this knight, so this is why rook e8 is stronger than rook takes f3 just before. The knight has to be defended, or else the rook is gone. Well, if the knight cannot move here because this knight covers the square, so if knight here, okay, that will lose the knight anyway here. So yeah, say knight here, check, and the rook is lost. So rook e3 would be the forced move, and then rook takes pawn. And you see now white has managed to have a clearer draw. There's this passed pawn, which is a monster, and that should keep the draw for white. But this is really difficult to see when you're in this position, isn't it? It's really difficult to see rook c8, knight takes, knight e4, rook e3, and then check, rook here, and then rook e8, takes, takes. Really difficult to see that, rook here and takes. Both players were under so much pressure the whole game through, so I think it's understandable why Magnus Carlsen played rook e4 in this position, which allowed rook f5, and yeah, the knight cannot go to d7 because of king c6, so knight e8, and the pawn can only be taken by the rook on e5 because of knight d6 check. If the knight takes the rook, if the knight takes the pawn, then knight d6 check wins the exchange. Well, black doesn't have to rush anything. Ivanchuk played king c5, getting out of the fork, and now knight on c7 attacks e6, so knight takes e5, and rook to h4. Let's drop back. on knight takes here, we have king d5, and that would lose one piece for white. So rook e5, king d6, check, and well, again, what would happen on rook takes h6? This is not what Carlsen played. Well, now there are two pieces attacked, so a4 to protect at least one piece here, and h5 protects the pawn. Knight d4 and rook e4, check, rook e5. So black basically has a is a pawn up and a central pawn, so exchanging pieces is good for him. This is why Carlsen played rook h4, knight d6, king d3, and there's a pin, c4, and knight f3, rook c5. Black doesn't have to rush, basically, and we see just a couple of maneuvers, and black is improving his king and piece position, and now you see white is under so much pressure here, and black is now marching forward. I think this king wants to go here. And you see him manage this, even giving up a pawn, but okay, it's an exchange of a pawn, but giving white the opportunity to have a pass pawn. Let's put it that way, but for the price of giving up the a pawn. And king e4 is strong, and the point is that after rook takes pawn, king d5 is intended, with rook c4 check winning the last pawn, and the king is protecting the only attacked pawn here, and that would leave black with two pawns against non-white pawns, which would win the game easily for black. So this is why we don't see rook takes h5. We see rook d6, so the king cannot go to d5, and this nice move, rook d4, and this is really a nice move. Let's look at, rook a8, rook a6 was Carlsen's move, but let's look at rook takes d4. This is of course what you have to calculate, what happens if, and then the pawn takes with check, and there are two moves. If king b3, that would allow king d5, stopping the pawn, and well, this king cannot stop these pawns, right? And in this position, after takes with check, what about king c4, keeping the king out of d5? Well, then black pushes, and funnily enough, this king kept this king out of d5, but that meant that the king has to stay on the c file, which would allow check and winning the queen. So this is why we don't see a rook exchange, and well, takes, check, takes. Again, black is up two pawns, white has none, and the exchange of rooks would be in black's favor. This is one anyway. On rook a4, Ivanchuk played rook c7, but I don't see why he didn't push e4 check. You cannot take this pawn because of check. King has to take, And now you see the pawn is untouchable. If king d2, king e1, you see this barrier and you cannot stop this pawn. But rook c7 anyway. Rook h4, rook h7, king e3, king e6, king e4. And this is a waiting move. King f5 and king g5. Now see what Ivanchuk is doing here. He pushes his passed pawn, and the only piece to stop it is the white king, and the white king is deflected, and now black gains a tempo. Very nice, getting out of the g file to play rook g1, and that cuts the white king out of the game. King h2, king f4, check. And in this position, Magnus Carlsen resigned to Ivanchuk, Vasily Ivanchuk. Why did he resign? Well, if you play rook e1 check, then there's king f2, and on takes we have checkmate. So this is the last game position, and it's really horrible to see the magician fall on his knees here in the endgame, which he's really strong at. Let's recap the game very quickly. This is the Scheveningen Sicilian, and somehow black managed to double white's pawns on the queen side, sorry, here. And well, I don't know how, but Ivanchuk really, with g5 and his follow-up, put white under so much pressure here. And we see black really improving his position move by move, and Carlsen really letting this one slip out of his fingers. A really long game, and you never know what's the reason to lose a game. Sometimes you're just not in top form. If you do sports, you know what I mean. Sometimes you cannot just do what you can do normally, and you're way weaker. Maybe there was just some problems with the thinking process. Well, this is already a very bad position for white, and it's just human, right? And the funny thing is that now Kramnik, whose game I wanted to cover for last round, which was very interesting, but I didn't manage to do it because of not having the time really. Kramnik is now leading with 8 points out of 12, and it's really the question who is going to win this tournament. It could be Kramnik now. Sorry, this is the last game position, and Carlsen lost this one and resigned. I hope you liked the game. Please subscribe and comment if you have thoughts on the game. I think you surely have, and it's nice to share them. Thanks a lot. Bye.